अच्छा, इसमें अभी ऑडियो म्यूट करो?
नहीं, वो चलेगा नहीं, कहीं जा नहीं सकता ना जब तक वो लाइव नहीं होता।
लाइव 5 मिनट हो जाएगा ना?
या
7 मिनट है। लाइव भी अभी यही शो होगा।
या और इसको
हमारे पास
so let me just see if it comes up. कब आएंगे?
स्टूडेंट्स को रास्ता है।
ओके, लाइक दूर कहीं?
चौदह फैसल।
ओके, इन केस
स्पीकर्स को
लाइट्स ऑन करो।
फ्रेम सही है। मैं रात में बैठी या कहाँ बैठी थी, तो तुम्हें नहीं लगता थोड़ा सा इस तरह फिट हो जाएगा? मैं जब तक करोगे ऐसे बैठी।
Is it
and
live?
transition there. Huh? And now the news.
बाकी खबरें ब्रेक के बाद.
All right. मैं आप? Okay.
हम तैयार हैं.
I'm absolutely there. All right. So we are good to go. And how are you guys?
Very good.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, आज मैंने बड़े जज्बे से अपना Fitbit काफ़ी दिनों के बाद पहना. Only to realize that it hasn't been charged in a very long time. So all these steps are not going anywhere. Absolutely.
At least कुछ तो है. हमारे पास तो वो भी नहीं है.
हाँ, आपकी तो पुरानी ज़माने की.
अरे दो लोगों ने पहना हुआ है और
combined our forces
Exactly.
unite.
Yes.
women
there you go.
leadership and you know.
We got to
everything.
move with the time ना. अब millennials बहुत कुछ कर रहे हैं. We can't be far behind.
No.
अच्छा मैं आज तक मुझे पता नहीं लगा मिलेनियल और उसमें बेबी बूमर्स में कौन सा वाला फर्क. हम लोग कौन से हैं?
हम बीच में हैं.
हम बीच में
हाँ.
कौन है?
हम generation Z हैं.
हम जनरेशन जी हैं.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now that we have learnt so much, it's a. We'll get on with this. Don't look at that too much because there's a little bit of a buffer.
Really? Yeah,
Because
sure.
we're going through a number of things.
Sure.
But hi and welcome to Campus Connections digital series. This series is being hosted by the New Spaces, and today we are going to be talking about raising capital for social entrepreneurship. It's a topic that we've talked about and spread and shared with our partner universities, who will slowly be logging on. And a lot of universities have also submitted questions. I'd like to welcome our guests right next to me. Right next to me on my left is Misbah Naqvi, who's the managing partner at I2I Ventures, and far away from me is Faraz Khan, who's a co-founder and CEO of Seed Ventures. My name is Rabia Gharib and I'm the chief editor of the New Spaces. Like I said, we have a lot of universities logging on and we've shared the topic and some thematical areas with them, and a lot have submitted questions, and also those who are logging on can submit questions and we'll try and address them as best we can. Before we begin today's discussion, I do want to give a shout out to Talia Zafar, who is giving us this platform and this fantastic idea to become part of something bigger, bigger than just a discussion, and something as big as Campus Connections. So Talia, thank you very much. So we give you a 3 thumbs up here. Just a thumbs up.
Yeah, just a thumbs up.
Thumbs up is good.
X Factor.
Thank you.
And in our studios today, we also have a few bloggers and representatives from our partner universities. So keep following the stream and the discussions, and we'll take it from there. So, Misbah and Faraz, both of you are deal with social enterprises on a day in and day out basis. The more we read about social enterprises, the more it appears that the people who set up enterprises, like socially good in nature, are crazy. So, Misbah, is that correct?
Often it is, but crazy doesn't have to mean bad. Crazy could be good crazy as well.
All right.
I think it's a challenging space. I think doing business and being an entrepreneur is difficult in itself. And then to push yourself even further and say not only are you going to do business and be an entrepreneur, but you're also going to have an extra target of achieving good. You really have to be a high achiever and you really have to be passionate about what you're doing.
Right.
Whether that translates into crazy, I'm not sure, but I would say good crazy, definitely.
Do you find, Faraz, that the difference in a characteristic of an entrepreneur is different when it comes to a commercial enterprise? And is it different than when you come into a for-profit social enterprise?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel that just commercial enterprises are easier to run.
Okay.
And easier to scale. Simply because when I was a banker, I converted into a commercial entrepreneur. And for me, making money was easy.
All right.
But then when I stumbled across social enterprise terminologies and space, that was 2009. That journey from 2009 to 2018 has been a far more challenging but more rewarding one.
All right.
So yes, this is my personal opinion that being a social entrepreneur is more rewarding but more challenging compared to just being a commercial venture operator.
Isn't it kind of a contradiction in itself to be a for-profit, socially good enterprise? Is it a conundrum, or is it a conflict within itself, or is it something that every business should strive to do, Misbah?
I think I don't think there's a conflict there. I think you can easily pursue profit and look for the planet and look out for people. And a lot of companies now, as their goals, are identifying people, planet, profits, so that it's not just one of those in isolation.
Right.
And I think it's important to also recognize that there, in some countries, these are formal structures that have now been acknowledged from a legal perspective as well. You have B Corps that are companies that are not necessarily not for profit, but they are actually have a double mission in terms of social as well as viable, profitable businesses. So I think it's definitely something that is, I think we're going to see more and more of with time. Like Faraz said, social entrepreneurship has been coming in and becoming more popular, becoming more prevalent over the last, I would say 10 years, 10 to 12 years or so. And I think now it's become so common that it's not unusual anymore to find people that are social entrepreneurs and are looking to do both things.
Right. So a lot of our students, especially when we went through the Campus Connections series to them, we found that there was a little bit of a confusion between what a non-profit is or an NGO is and what a socially conscious company is. So what exactly is the difference? If you could just highlight maybe 2 or 3 of the distinct traits of what an NGO is and how is it different from being a social enterprise?
Well, just at the macro level, for-profit and not-for-profit and social enterprise is right in the middle,
right,
where making profits is not a crime, it's not an issue. Reinvestment of those profits into scaling up the business is an acceptable norm. Now these are those things that 15 years ago we went across to the development sector and we said that we created the term called business in sustainability, business in development.
Okay.
And the doors were shut on our faces. It's like, what are you talking about? How can you just bring business into the development side? Now it's an accepted norm. So आपको अगर एक स्टेप आप पीछे लेते हैं तो आप देखते हैं कि ये चीज़ें क्यों, जितनी भी इकोनॉमीज हैं दुनिया में, the governments have got limited resources to provide social services for their populations. Not for profit, and the governments couldn't do that. Not for profits ne janam liya, and they came up, and that model kind of, I wouldn't say failed, but it has not given the desired kind of a result, and that did not reduce that gap. So social enterprises came into being. Okay. So it's another solution and a way forward that major governments like Canada, New Zealand, Nordics, Scotland, उनके regulatory framework जैसे मिसबा ने कहा इतने strong हो चुके हैं कि they really understand and breathe. So at the regulatory framework level, at the political level, they understand the value of a social economy now.
Right. But when you say that there are जो बीच में NGOs थे या non-for-profits थे, when they failed, the reason for failure is either you don't have enough money, so you can't provide the services, or you can't scale up enough. But a social enterprise suffers from the same thing, same issue, because a social enterprise isn't registered as a non-profit. So we are seeking to raise our own funding, apply for grants. So that's actually the challenging part that you talked about. But where does all this money come from, and how is it possible for a social enterprise or social enterprise startup to actually raise capital so that it doesn't fail?
I think it's important to also clarify that a lot of non-profits struggle with sustainability.
Right.
And the whole idea of social enterprise is to look at businesses that are sustainable in themselves, because like Faraz said, they are not for profit, but they are not non-profit. Right? Their goal is not to create profit unless it is to plow it back into the business and create more value within the business. And that's where sustainability comes from. So a lot of social enterprises look at, I'll give you an example, housing for example, in a way that is not charity based, or it may be charity based, but it's in a sustainable model. So the idea is that once you put money into something, it continues to give back into the company. You make some money from it and you put it back in again.
Right.
So from that perspective, I think it's important to understand that once you start looking at sustainability and generating profits for your own company to grow,
Right.
the capital issue is somewhat addressed.
Okay.
But as far as your question about startups and social enterprises is concerned, thankfully, over the last 10 years or so, more and more capital has been focused on supporting these kind of businesses, these kind of organizations, there are many more examples now in the world where these kind of companies are actually successfully raising money
Right.
from individuals through partnerships, through public-private partnerships, through support of other institutional
Right.
investors, such as the kind of work that Faraz and I are also doing.
So Misbah, I want to ask you one question, and Faraz, I'm going to plant a question with you. Misbah, the question I want you to think about and very clearly talk to us about is what. So in a commercial business, we reach out to angel investors, friends and families, and there's a sequence of people we go to before we are able to get sustainable capital. So what are those steps? Who should a social enterprise go to in what sequence of steps? And are banks and formal institutions also part of that? So that's your question. For Faraz, I want, after Misbah answers the question, I want you to ask, to talk about what sectors are social enterprises set up in? So for example, Misbah talked about housing. What other industries can students or startups focus on? And how far and wide does that, do they have to kind of expand in their service to be able to attract funding and attract capital and become a little bit sustainable?
And you would like to have the Pakistan context?
I would like a Pakistan context, and also if you could give some examples of international.
Sure.
So Misbah, first you.
Sure. So in terms of the kind of steps that a social enterprise goes through in terms of raising money, I think similar, Rabia, to what you said with any other business, a lot of times they start with friends and family.
Yeah.
Because these are people that you know, that you trust, and that are willing to give you a little bit to get started. Then comes soft funding. So a lot of times in social enterprise, development organizations don't think that the fact that you're also making a profit is a bad thing. So they may actually be funding not profits, but they may also be funding social enterprises. So that's another level that then you can go and tap into. And that often is soft funding or it's grant funding. So I would say that kind of funding is good if you're still checking whether or not your product is viable, whether your service is structured in a way that can continue on an organizational perspective, from an organizational perspective, and if your business model really makes sense. And then you have investors that are coming in at a seed level or an early stage level. So in markets like Pakistan, a lot of businesses can actually have social impact, even though they may not be non-profit businesses.
Okay.
And so from that perspective, I think it's important to understand if you're providing clean drinking water or you're providing waste management services, you may actually still be able to make money, but you're also ticking the box for social impact.
Right.
And so institutional investors may look at your business and say, this is a viable business, we want to put money into it, and they may give you seed level funding. And so it is possible for a social enterprise to raise money at that level.
Right.
And then of course, once you've started off with that, you have a few years under your belt, you have a certain amount of traction with your business, you can graduate on to more formal players, later stage investment, maybe VCs and other investment institutions.
Okay, so wow, you really took us through that. Okay, I'm going to come back to this because I have a couple more questions, but Faraz, yours. What industries and sectors should specifically startup social enterprises be focusing on?
So the parameter is that any social challenge that individuals or communities are facing, if we can actually develop a business model to solve that challenge, is a market or is a vertical.
Okay.
And if individually we start getting into the verticals, there are thousands of them.
Okay.
But I'd really make it broad.
Okay.
Okay. Financial inclusion. So Pakistan's the official figures are 23% population have got bank account. Unofficially, 16 to 17% bank accounts are there. So if you have got a social enterprise that engages bottom of the pyramid and people who are not financially inclusive and can bring them into this net in which they grow as well, and that's a huge segment the whole world is working. Example, fintech has played a fantastic part in that. M-Pesa in Kenya, it's a great example. Why? Because 45% of Kenya's economy, GDP, is traded and transacted on M-Pesa.
Right.
So that's the potential of scale and how it can change the economy. A small idea.
Right.
Then we've got agri. Look at Pakistan, 70% agrarian society. There are no processes, there are no structures, there are no cold storages.
No systems.
No systems. So
Right.
anything you pick up and you solve it through because it would directly impact the community, it would be a social enterprise.
Right.
Pick up health and sanitation.
Yeah.
I mean, huge space. I'll give you an example of a startup that has just brought in a change in diagnostics. अब diagnostics क्या है? जितने labs हैं इधर, ठीक है?
Right.
Labs में अगर गुजरांवाला में एक बंदे को कोई बीमारी है, डॉक्टर उसको बोलता है 15 टेस्ट कराओ, वो लाहौर जाता है वहाँ, ठीक है? फिर जाने में टाइम लगता है, टेस्ट कराने में 5 दिन लगते हैं, फिर उसको 6 दिन के अंदर पता लगता है इसको बीमारी है क्या. ना इसको एक टेक्नोलॉजी कंपनी ने इम्पैक्ट पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कैसे सॉल्व किया? एक स्ट्रिप लेकर आए कि वो जाकर गांव में इसको टेस्ट कर सकते हैं और वो आपको बता देगा कि आपको बीमारी कौन सी है within 2 minutes across 88 diseases.
Right.
Now, suddenly you've saved life, time, resources. Brilliant example of a social enterprise.
Right.
Education, access to education. Khan Academy, I think it's a great example of a social enterprise.
Right.
Because it has provided education on multiple levels to anyone who has got a device.
Absolutely.
And then there are a lot of examples of social enterprises working in rural communities through technology that are actually changing the landscape. So I would say education, agri, health and sanitation, financial inclusion are those sectors that are no-brainers.
But you know, it's
And energy.
and
Sorry,
of
I
course,
missed one.
there's a lot on energy.
Yes.
So that's where the IoT space comes in and everything, and then you start building on, you know, how do you use data and AI to actually configure systems
True.
so that things become more efficient and your delivery systems become more efficient. You know, it's really interesting. Every sector that you have talked about is a traditional sector available, obviously available in every part of the world, which is being disrupted by technology. And that seems to be the case now, that there's access to so much technology and so many solutions that it's actually the technology companies that are creating the social enterprises. Is that the correct trend globally also, that you both find?
I mean, there are definitely a lot of technology companies that are looking at this. I think people are also finding that they can leverage technology in a way that they haven't been able to before, because
Right.
like you said, access has become so much more prevalent. I'll give you an example of Pakistan. We were recently both at 021 Disrupt, which is the startup tech conference in this weekend, and organized by the Nest IO. And what was really great to see is that we had so many entrepreneurs that are looking to do things in the space where there is also a social impact from what they're doing.
Right.
Exactly the kind of businesses the examples Faraz gave and what you're talking about in terms of disrupting using technology.
Right.
So I think even in a market like Pakistan, on one hand you have this huge population that has needs that are often not being addressed. There are some systems that are broken where there is an opportunity to bring in systems that actually work and efficiencies, and you have a young population with great access to technology
Right.
that is being able to leverage the global opportunities like they never had before.
Right.
They're able to learn from global players, they're able to access technology platforms and apply them in Pakistan's context. So
Absolutely.
I was really happy to meet a lot of people, some young, some not so young, that are actually focusing on using technology in a very creative way
Right.
to solve issues that we face in Pakistan.
And like Faraz started off saying that we are never too young to do anything. So, you know, don't. It's
Absolutely.
never too late to start. There's a question that somebody had sent in, one of the students has sent in, that what are the 3 most common reasons why social enterprises fail? We've touched upon them very briefly, but just 3 concrete reasons as to why social enterprises fail. For us?
Let me start with
Good
one,
one.
and then Ms. Bucket actually contribute.
Sure.
I think research, lack of research, I find personally and institutionally, they have got great solutions. They understand the problem, but it is from their perspective, the entrepreneur's perspective. If you do extensive research in your potential customer base, you would realize that your solution and the context of that problem is basically slightly or at times 360-degree different
Okay.
from what you have presumed.
All right. So kind of having that correct context of why you should actually have a business.
Yes.
Correct?
Lack of research is probably one of the top ones that I feel. The second is access to capital.
Okay.
Access to patient capital. Now, patient capital, I think Misbah will explain very well. You know, there are investors who would say, "ठीक है यार, ये मैंने पैसे लगाए हैं. This is the money that I'm giving you. What is the return? How much is the return? When is the return?"
Right.
A patient investor is going to be like, all right, he would be more founder friendly. The way I2I is coming up with this particular fund.
Right.
That is critical. So these two things are non-existing. I think third one, or probably you can add to these two as well.
Yeah, I would like to add to it. Actually, I think
Yeah.
market research leads on to knowing your business model.
Yeah.
I think no matter what kind of organization you are, what kind of company or business you're looking to set up, you have to understand different aspects of your business model. Obviously, first start with something on paper. But like Farah said, very quickly you have to go out in the market and understand, is it even viable? Do people even want what you're doing?
Right.
Will they pay for your product? And so in commercial businesses and in startups, there's a concept of MVP, the minimum viable product. And I think there's no reason why we should not apply that to social enterprises.
Yeah.
So when you have an idea, go out and test it, get a focus group, see if people will pay for it. If you're able to sell certain amount of your services or products at a certain price, that's the indication to you that this is going to go somewhere. And then you build in all the other aspects of it.
Right.
The second thing going on with what Farah said, I think capital is definitely important, and patient capital, a term that Acumen, which at the time was Acumen Fund and now it's known as Acumen, actually really pushed forward in globally, was the idea that you have to understand that in certain markets, due to certain challenges and where the population may be base of the pyramid and those are your customers, it takes a little bit more time to build adoption and to build those businesses. And so capital that is not requiring a return in 2 years, but is able to say, here's the money, we trust in what you're doing, we believe in the entrepreneur, and we will wait for returns to come over a longer time frame.
Right.
So I think that is definitely important.
Absolutely.
I think one other key thing is understanding how far the money that you're raising will get you.
Okay.
So what we call the runway. If you've raised a certain amount of money,
Yeah.
try and sit down, reach out to people if you don't have those skills yourself. Talk to somebody who can understand finance, who can help you understand how much money you have, what is your burn rate, how long will that money take you, and when will you next need to raise more money?
Right.
Do you need to raise more than what you have raised right now? I think that is important because sometimes businesses find out they're on a path, they're doing well, they're getting money for their goods and services that they're selling, but they run out of money.
Right.
Because they may not have done that homework of understanding, okay, I've raised, $100,000. How far will those $100,000 take me? Do I need to raise money again in 6 months or 1 year, etc.? So I think that understanding how far the money you have will take you is also important, and that's also linked to resources and how you hire people, if you're spending money on a fancy office or not, if you're paying yourself a huge salary and not necessarily putting money back into the business. Those are all things that we see sometimes as reasons.
Be accountable for everything that you
Absolutely.
put in, because
Absolutely.
that's how that circular economy, which we'll talk about a little later, because that was also one of the questions sent in. We'll come back to. You're itching to say something.
Yes. The entrepreneurs these days are extremely lucky. I mean, I must say that.
Right.
Life is much easier for them. At O21 as well, at Jahan's conference, I just kind of voiced this thing. Now, there are a lot of structures available, there are a lot of support structures available. Now, access to capital is also available. I always ask the entrepreneur a question when they come and they want equity funding or debt funding. I say, tumko paise nahi milte. If you don't get the money, how will you run your business? Tell me that, because in previous times, in our parents' time, these structures were not available. You had friends and family,
right.
but you did not have seed funders, you did not have VCs, you did not have impact investors. No, these structures weren't accessible, but they had this will.
Right.
Unfortunately, that because of these structures and systems and access to capital, I think there is, and this is a controversial point, but I think there is this lethargy and dependability that is kind of created in the minds of the entrepreneurs as well, कि ठीक है यार, हमारे पैसे तो नहीं है, ठीक है, ये structure तो है, नहीं हुआ तो कुछ और कर लेंगे.
Right.
So that will to just carry on and just make it happen, somehow that burning fire is kind of, I'm not saying on all of them, but in some pockets I see that, and that is not a good sign.
Right. The burning fire to actually go ahead with just anything without what Ms. Banu earlier talked about, test the product, see if there's a demand.
No. Like, you have to go through this process,
right,
irrespective. I mean, you have to create something, try to sell it to the respective market, validate your product or a service.
Absolutely.
There is no other way. But अब पैसे नहीं मिले, पैसे कहाँ से लेने? ठीक है? So you need to keep on innovating. Probably that organic growth without equity and debt capital would be extremely slow, but that would teach you, that would really make you the entrepreneurs that we need right now.
I want to do a follow-up question, but there's a question that's come in by Sajjad Ali Asher. He's asked that major social enterprises in Pakistan never idealized the West to sort out the problem. It resulted more illiteracy as education never been considered core solution. We need social units, not economic units. Do you have a comment?
Could we...
So it resulted in more illiteracy as education has never been considered a core solution. So you mentioned that one of the sectors was education, which required a lot of disruption. Do you think that it should be that? But very few people are willing to pay for the education. There's not patient capital available for education. From Benazir Bhutto's time, where kaun sa naya jeevan jo bhi, the schools at the grassroots level,
Nayi Roshni school,
jo 5 saal mein aapko 50,000.
I was a Nayi Roshni student.
Very
really
good.
that's amazing.
Really. So we'd like to learn about that also. But is it possible to get patient capital for education, or do we need to convert that into a commercial business so that education, which is very desperately needed, should be well funded?
Education and delivery of education, that both these things are changing now.
Okay.
What does education do? It changes mindset.
Right.
And then in our part of the world, it is a source of income for you as well. It's an investment that you actually put in to your children so they could actually become economically independent.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, these are the two core values to it.
Correct.
Now, people who are actually absorbing that human capital, their requirements, at least globally, are changing. They are not looking for degrees. They're looking for skills. Okay? Now, those skills can be acquired now at
a fraction
at a fraction of a cost in microbit learning environments rather than a degree and university environments. And I think that thing is slowly trickling down to the Pakistani ecosystem. It's not there, we're far, but at the top leadership, at the C-suite level, people are talking about this now.
Right, but don't you think that we kind of we're kind of taking a really idealistic example of this? So education from a distance, it seems like okay, dehaton mein hum tablets leke chale jayenge aur bilkul it'll be like hangama ho jayega. But when you actually go down to it, there's infrastructure issues. There's that again, the delivery of content. So there are multiple age groups being stuffed and needing to learn the same kind of content. So multi-age, multi-classroom settings. It's very different than what we ideally see, that technology is the ultimate solution. So is technology the ultimate solution for something like solving the education crisis?
Not entirely.
Okay.
We run Pakistan's largest social enterprise inculcation program in the country. So we are in 30 cities, and we have got an outreach to we have done in 2 years 10,000 students. And this challenge that you're talking about, yes, our solution is technology, but it's a hybrid of mentoring and inculcating these concepts at human level as well.
Right.
Through only technology, because there are places in Khuzdar, Pashin, Gilgit-Baltistan, there are no setups, there is no internet, there is no tablets, there are no computers. So it has to be a hybrid, at least in Pakistani context, integration of hybrid human as well as technology-based solutions.
All right.
And that human intervention and human access to qualified teachers and qualified academics into these far-flung areas is an absolute critical. Otherwise, you would get people like me.
It's a great example of Nain Roshni student. I also just want to add to that. I was in Chitral recently, and I visited some Khan Development Network schools, which have a very good standard of learning. They were giving us examples of children who walk 2 hours to get to the school because they're so keen to learn. And it was actually the 3rd day of Eid when I was there, and there were 2 kids who were there, and they said, "Ye pata nahi kyun aa gaye, inko itna shauq hai school aane ka, school to band hai aaj." For their class it was closed, but they were there. So there's a passion and a desire is absolutely there. But the other thing that I was really happy to see in those areas, specifically in that area of Chitral, was that the KP government has actually done a really good job of the school of focusing on education and looking at how they can get education to the kids that may be in areas which don't have access to it otherwise. So I think that is absolutely important, but like Faraz said, it's a hybrid. You have to take something like that, which is a government initiative, which is going out and getting to people, maybe bringing technology in there where there is a teacher, there is some kind of mentorship, there is a link, as opposed to thinking कि सिर्फ हम सेटअप कर देंगे और कोई बच्चा इसको देख लेगा, डाउनलोड कर लेगा. Having said that, obviously at certain other levels of education, maybe at a senior school level or at a college level, there's a lot more opportunity to leverage technology in a way that is providing access to courses, course content online, so that people in larger cities who can access it can then actually benefit from that education. So education is, I mean, we should also be clear, it's not just primary, we're talking about secondary and tertiary and obviously college level as well.
Absolutely. There's a question that was earlier sent in is, do you think it is more difficult to market and brand socially responsible companies? I'm going to give you just a few seconds to think about that. And for everyone who's watching, I'd just like to let you know, if you have a question that you would like to submit, please, you can log on to this chat, or you can follow any of the streams that are available and also submit the questions. Also, if you like what the New Spaces team does, be sure and share this link and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you never miss out on any of the videos that we publish. I like this, but unfortunately we don't have virtual reality where you do a thumbs up and it's liked over there.
Oh no. I'll go home and watch the video later and like it several times.
But you know, like
friends and family, you know.
But you know, once
ought to be odd timing.
Yeah.
If you keep on liking it many times,
it's like unlike. like unlike. All right. So is it more difficult to market a socially good company?
Who are you marketing it to? Are you marketing? Is that to the consumers?
Right.
Are you talking about the investors?
I think it has to be both. So your customers also, because the more people you have, that's where you have your MVP being actually a viable product, and you need more customers, and you also need to be able to brand your company to investors so that you are able to serve more customers.
I think to consumers, because of the not-for-profit environment, the charity environment, at least in my Pakistani context, I'm saying, they're used to actually getting free stuff.
Right.
They would immediately see the value in your proposition, okay, or whatever product or service that you're bringing in. But if you ask them to pay 3 rupees a month, I'll give you an example. So we put this water sanitation plant in outside Sheikhupura, right? Solar powered. And we said, all right, you run it now, the community. And in 3 months' time, it was rusted. No one was making. Like, kyun nahi kar rahe ho isme? So why aren't you actually doing it? It's like because you know it's a waste of time. We'd rather go to that nala and actually take the water in. No one was taking the ownership of it. Then what we realized was that you need to educate and demonstrate the value that clean water is going to give to each household. So we did maths and calculation, and we said, all right, if you drink the clean water, you would save time in commute.
Right.
That is this much money. You would you would not go to the doctor. That would save this much money. You would not pay for the medicine. That would save this much money. And if you actually take this clean water, you'll save, let's say, 100 rupees a month. Right. Now you have to pay just 3 rupees. Now once they understood the maths, it was very easy.
The value proposition.
The value proposition.
So you need to have your value proposition extremely clear.
Yeah.
For them. What about for the investors? How do you, again, coming back to this, to raise the value without saying that I need X millions of dollars, मुझे चंद हजार रुपए चाहिए ताकि मैं अपना काम कर सकूं. So again, how do you get that?
I think investors, again, you may be a socially responsible business, but you have, at the end of the day, you are a business. And when you are approaching investors, you have to keep that in mind. Investors are looking, unless they are patient capital investors and they may be impact investors specifically, like Acumen and Inciter, they have certain goals that they want you to reach from a social impact perspective, but they also have certain goals that they want you to reach from a financial perspective.
Of course.
You have to understand when and how you're going to reach those goals. Marketing per se to investors, so first of all, I mean, just take a step back, know your investor. Just like you're saying know your customer, you have to know who you're talking to.
Right.
If you're talking to an investor that is not looking at funds or not looking at businesses at an early stage, then you're wasting your time. So similarly, in Pakistan, we have the opportunity and the privilege that we actually are able to have a lot of social impact from what we are doing. So you may be talking to a social, if you're talking to a social investor, you have to highlight the social impact of what you're doing,
of course,
along with the fact that you're sustainable. If you're talking to a hardcore commercial investor, you have to highlight the fact that you will be making money, along with the fact that you're helping people and you're impacting lives.
सामने कौन है, देख के
करें, थोड़ा homework करें, समझें कि उनकी priority क्या है. Doesn't mean you change your business. I'm not at all saying that run after money कि जिसने जो चाहे वो आपको कह दें कि ये 5 चीजें कर लो तो आपने कर ली और आप पैसे लेने चले गए. But you have to understand who is sitting with you across the table.
Right.
Adding to what just Misbah said, so there are two other sources of capital available, especially in the Pakistani ecosystem. One is the private sector CSR, and the other is the development sector grants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kindly do not think this, that you have made it if you have gotten CSR and grant money. Because it's great that you have access to that, but when the investor will put in money, they would actually help you grow the business as a business, as a socially responsible business. But the grant and CSR money, of course, would actually have the similar kind of benchmarks as well, but they would not question you that diligently, that microscopically for that. So the dependency on a social enterprise, of a social enterprise on grants and CSR money should get minimal and should be looking for actually either organic growth or investor capital or impact investor capital.
That's so interesting you say that, because CSR money, there are very loose milestones, they're very loose deliverables, but you are actually creating milestones which service a particular fund or a particular grant as opposed to bringing the maximum benefit. And I think one of the, when we were talking about what are the 3 or 4 factors that result in failures of social enterprises, one failure is actually caused by not treating it as a business and treating it as a project, that this has a limited lifespan. I'm only going to get X number of dollars or rupees out of it for a grant, from a grant, and then it'll go away. So no long-term sustainability. So let's talk about sustainability, but before I talk about sustainability, Dr. Shoaib Zaidi from UIT has logged on and he said, glad to see Faraz Saab address the growing need of skills. Would love the panelists' views on the future of formal tertiary education. So we talked much about primary and secondary. We briefly talked about it, Dr. Shoaib, but if we can kind of just give a really quick summary on tertiary education and how that is being disrupted. You guys.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, one example that I can give is the Aman Foundation that has done quite a bit in the tertiary space. The government itself is also looking at certain initiatives to bring up, people, provide skills, etc. I think it's very important to look at this in not in isolation. You have to look at the kind of skills that you're building from a tertiary education perspective, as well as what the market is requiring. What is the future in the next 5 years? I think technical skills right now are a very important thing to focus on, because of the earlier discussion we had, how much of technology is changing, what we're doing. But we also have to understand that that may not be for everybody. So there might be an opportunity to look at simple skills like plumbing skills or electricians, or because again, population is huge. There's growing youth population. We know that we need to address that, and I think tertiary skill development is an opportunity that definitely should be leveraged. What the question over here, I think, is from a socially responsible business perspective, how can you actually set up a business model where you're able to generate returns in a way that allows you to be sustainable? And I think that maybe comes back to what Faraz was saying earlier. Maybe start off with a soft funding approach, maybe more of CSR engagement, and then see how you can actually build a more viable business model around it.
Right, you've got Supoon written up.
Yeah. Hello, Dr. Shoaib, क्या हाल है आपके? Hope you're well. Hunar, Aman, Punjab Skill Development Fund are very important players in this ecosystem. But there is one, so before coming to the social enterprise solutions out of these tertiary skills, and I would like to actually point out one challenge that these supply organizations are facing. So Hunar is training these fantastic individuals on like electricians,
AC,
plumbers, and all that across all the verticals. Aman is doing that. Punjab Skill Development Fund is doing that. What they're doing is that they're actually bringing qualified individuals in the market. Now, the absorption of these individuals in private and public sector is not happening.
Right.
Now, that is actually increasing the frustration level at the base of the pyramid in the qualified sector.
So the supply is being created. But
Yes.
not enough demand.
Not demand is
Okay,
being created.
good.
Now, we were in conversation with the government and a couple of foundations, and we said, all right, create micro entrepreneurships or micro or nano funding to create enterprises/social enterprises for all these qualified individuals that have gone onto the market and have not been absorbed in the private or public sector.
Right.
Now, that is one solution that is going to lead to institutions like Sukoon.
Right.
Sukoon is a startup that that was created some years ago. I don't know what has happened to the traction of it, but the idea is good, and that is the idea that would evolve.
Right.
Probably it would have different verticals. Plumbers का शायद अपना हो जाए बाद में, electricians का अपना हो जाए, cobblers का अपना हो जाए. Probably it will actually have different kind of traction in different kind of urban rural settings. That's a different conversation altogether. But like Mispa said, you need to create social enterprises right at the mouth of where the supply is coming.
Right.
So there is an alternative absorption of this human and of this talent into the market.
But you know, sorry, go ahead.
Now, I was going to add to that another interesting example, which is again has a problem at the other end of the market, is an organization that I2I has also worked with in our last cohort called Mocha.online.
Okay.
And they are a domestic on-demand domestic services business based out of Islamabad, and inshallah they'll be expanding soon as well. And what they do is that they provide, they go into bastis, they recruit uneducated, relatively unskilled workers. They train them, and then they help them access domestic help services in the market.
Okay.
So if I have guests coming suddenly and I need someone to come and cook for me for 2 hours, I can actually go on an on-demand service and request somebody to come, and the Mocha team will identify someone that they have trained that can be sent to me. So in their context, they are actually saying that demand is so huge that they're having to regulate supply, and that is a great example of an opportunity that one entity has identified. But the fact that they're actually training these people, understanding, they're sitting with them in their homes, they're understanding who they are, they're doing a background check and all of that as well to give comfort to the customer who's calling someone into their house. The fact that they actually are regulating supply right now is a good problem to have. So there is another side of it as well. I think comes back to what you're saying is demand कहाँ है और कौन सी ये areas हैं जहाँ पे we should not just blindly train people and say okay हमने तो train कर दिया, but also see where is the demand, where is the economy going,
Absolutely.
and where can they be absorbed.
It's very interesting that you say that part of one of their SOPs is to quality check them also and do their background checks, because one problem that you'll continuously face with being such a connected world is a reputation risk. So you have one bad experience and you will put it on the internet, and that'll be the end of you ever trusting any other service. So that's really good. So as long as, I think the solution to that problem of taking care of reputation risk is make sure that you have done, as part of an organization, you have done the background check, the quality check, and also you are in touch with where you are getting the supply from. Make sure that their quality and benchmarks are also met. We've been talking about worth and impact, and I want to touch a little bit about that. But before we do that, Sophia Ahmed has asked, don't know if it's been asked, but how to convert NGOs into social businesses. Faraz, very early on you talked about how social enterprises, why the rise of social enterprises, but is there a way that existing NGOs can be converted into social businesses?
When I was diving into this space, I had a brief stint with British Red Cross while I was in London. And they were facing the same problem because there was lack of philanthropy, and they were like dying funds. So they wanted to convert into a social enterprise, and they developed a retail distribution system, and they asked people whatever things that they're throwing and they've gone old, okay, just donate, and they started selling that to the audience. Okay. Now for me that was the first real example of how a conventional NGO, not-for-profit like British Red Cross has converted to social enterprise models where there is sustainability, and they were looking for creating products and services that people would actually pay for, and that's how they would grow their impact. And I think in Pakistan as well there is a huge opportunity for actually educating the not-for-profit sector of how to create sustainable models, because a lot of not-for-profit sector is doing fantastic work.
Right.
But they're extremely grant dependent or donor dependent, and that's why the capacity to think in a business model is not there. It's a matter of kind of collaborating and giving them that insights, and they can really continue do whatever work they're doing.
Right. Again, we're coming back to this concept of circular economy, where you kind of reinvent yourself, re-engineer yourself, and benefit yourself. Are there any other examples beyond this, the Red Cross that you talked about, where we can illustrate a good way that the circular economy is being put into practice?
We were talking earlier about this the social enterprise called Risk.
Okay.
Started by these fantastic couple of kids, and the concept is very simple. Food is wasted. Okay, you go to restaurants, you go to hotels, you go to any food outlet, there is always a percentage of food, sometimes at the point that it's 50% wasted. These kids went to the food authorities and for Forsynic Labs and international food quality authorities, and they developed a mechanism through which they would collect, repackage, and they make sure the nutritional level and the hygiene level remains, and then they would go and distribute it to people who do not have food.
Right.
And then they have developed this sponsorship mechanism of various hospitality outlets to actually kind of scale it up. It's working very well, because just by, if you save that wastage, it could be redeployed into the economy. The second one is, do you know 60% of our agri crops are wasted because we don't have cold storage? 60% of our agri.
Right.
And it's crazy. If you even save that to 30%, our IMF debts would actually get reduced significantly. So, these are these opportunities that are right there.
Right.
And these two examples are fantastic. I'm sure that Misbah would have few as well. And they are really, they are playing that critical role that the government needs to learn from.
Right. I feel like I'm giving an exam, because I've been trying to read what you've been writing and say if I can say it out. At least उनकी handwriting मुझे थोड़ी बहुत समझ आ गई.
Doctors की handwriting है मेरी जी, इसकी बहुत अच्छी है. मैं नई रोशनी से पढ़ा हूँ ना, तो मेरी handwriting इतनी अच्छी है जी.
Any examples that you can share?
Yeah, I was going to share an example of a company called Saaf Suthra Shahar, and they are also an example of a company that started with a pure NGO model and is now was also in the Invest to Innovate Accelerator, and as part of that they actually pivoted a little bit and tried to bring in sustainability into their own organization. And they basically, as the name suggests, Saaf Suthra Shahar, they're based out of Islamabad. They are looking at recycling. Why is
everything based out of Islamabad?
Just these two examples I happen to give were based out of Islamabad, but there's a lot of very exciting things in Karachi
well.
and across the world. I know Peshawar has a lot of very interesting things, and Lahore too. But Saaf Suthra Shahar basically is focusing on waste management and waste recycling at the home level and the institutional level. So what they've done is they've actually gone out and partnered with corporates that adopt the program, and they separate wet waste and dry waste, which is one of the issues with हम लोग जब सारा कूड़ा एक जगह डाल देते हैं तो उसमें से recycling के opportunities कम हो जाती हैं, because a lot of the times the dry waste needs to be separate from the wet waste. And so they've developed this whole chain where in the end they actually sell the waste to factories that are set up for recycling. So rather than say हम अपनी factory set up करने जा रहे हैं, they found a way to deal with the factory with the factories that are already available. They've connected with individual consumers and corporates at the level of the home and the institution, and they're coming in the middle, and then they're separating the waste. Now, as a future, they also will engage Raddi paper wale and other people that they can bring into the chain.
Right.
But for now, and because the corporates at least that I'm aware of are paying for this service.
Right.
And even for the areas where it's actually free, the factories where they're selling the waste is actually paying for for that.
Amazing.
So
That's amazing.
yeah, so that's again an interesting example.
Right. So a follow-up to this, somebody had actually sent in a question, and I'm trying to think or read where this is. Oh, in terms of business models, so there seems to be a lot of work already being done, and just in the span of the 40 minutes that we've been online, both of you have suggested a number of them. Should a new startup, especially at the university level, should they look for existing things and re-engineer and innovate? Or should they go and look for something absolutely new, which hasn't been solved as yet?
My personal inclination is just simple. Be simple. Go out there, you see a social challenge. If there is a social challenge, pick it up and solve it. Don't think big right now at this point of time. No, sorry. Think big, but start small.
Right.
Okay?
But just start.
Just start. Don't procrastinate too much. Okay?
Don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it. I mean, yes, think about the business model and all the process that Ms. Ba has just kind of shared. But karun, na karun, fail ho jayega, paise kahan se aayenge, amma ba kya kahenge, all those things. Seriously, just get rid of those.
Rishta aayega ya nahi.
Thank you so much. That's an important one.
But what about you? Existing or new?
I think both. I think there's no harm in looking at the local environment and replicating something that has been done somewhere else, as long as you're doing it in the local context.
Right.
ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आपने कहीं और चीज़ देखी, आपने कहा this is great, it's working in Canada, it's going to work in Pakistan. Absolutely. And just replicate it.
Absolutely.
So and obviously never infringe anybody else's patent, and do not plagiarize.
Right.
Having said that, there's a lot of opportunity in Pakistan where you can start off with things that have been done somewhere else, do it a little differently. But like Faraz said, 100% agree. Find a problem that's in front of you. I feel like the best solutions are the ones that come out of a simple and elegant solution to a problem that's right there in front of you.
Right, and absolutely. And the more you read up and just go out and look at what's happening around you, and the more people you meet and the more opportunities you have to network, you will learn what all is being done out there. Mm-hmm. And I think even if you go through tech blogs, you will often find a lot of information which is available on business models and companies abroad. It's only now very slowly and painfully are people starting to write about local ventures. Mm-hmm. And I think that knowledge share is extremely important. And that's why we reached out to the universities and said, if you go through the newspaces.com website and the videos that we have, the articles and editorials that we have, we write about local and then work our way global, right? So the more knowledge sharing there is, the more it is. So if you do take a moment to visit the newspaces.com website, be sure and click on the notification so you learn about what we write about from local to global, and also follow us on our social media and the YouTube space also, so that you don't miss out on the stuff and the knowledge sharing that we do. And of course, if you like what we do, then go ahead and share this video and the other videos that we have. Just we're wrapping things up here. I want to address sustainability and impact. So sustainability, we talked about it again a little bit earlier, but how do you measure impact? And what should startups and social enterprises be looking at to be sure that they are able to measure impact? How do they do it?
There is no right and wrong answer to this question.
कोई तो toolkit होगा.
The conventional way is to actually benchmark the impacts against the SDGs and MDGs.
Right.
And that's broadly used everywhere. But then the impact investors and philanthropists and angel investors, they've got different mechanisms. But a broad kind of a frame is SDG and MDG benchmarks. We do it in a different way. We do it kind of a combination of socio-commercial side of it. Of course, keeping a very strong check on the SDG, MDGs, but in general, that's how it's approached. I don't know, Ms. Bhatt.
No, I completely agree, and I think again, you can define impact in a more strict sense, like some organizations do, and that's fine because that's the criteria for putting money out. But you can also address it broadly. So if you're creating an employment, if you're providing goods and services either more efficiently or at a better value than has been done before, if you're bringing in new goods and services that people have not had an access to, if you're actually improving core levels of poverty and providing people with better livelihoods, if you're bringing in financial inclusion, if you're giving them a better way, if you're giving them clean drinking water and their health is impacted at the end of it. So there are several ways that you can actually do that. I think starting with the SDGs is a good benchmark, and again comes down to how are the lives changing of the people that are ultimately your end consumers,
right?
Or even in the value chain, if you're looking at a value chain, how are their lives in one area at one time versus another? You can actually do impact studies. You can actually, there's a lean data approach, which means that you take a few benchmarks and then you just build on, extrapolate on those and say agar ye hua hai to uska matlab hai ki is target population mein ye hua hai. Therefore you can say that if you've served 10 times that many people, your impact has probably been that much. So there are some methodologies that can be used, but at the end of the day, I think it's a very the description can change depending on who you're talking to.
There are a wide number of topics that we've addressed. The last one I want to end up with is scalability, and I know it's such a vast topic, but just if you could give some tips on how social enterprises, or any enterprise for that matter, can scale up, because on various studies, the average lifespan of a social enterprise seems to be about 10 years. Give or take a few. But this means, yes, we are looking at the impact, but we're also looking at the funding challenges and everything else. How is a social enterprise supposed to scale up?
So I will start with a quote that I'm plagiarizing after saying you shouldn't do that. But no, I will credit them. Yeah. So at 0 to 1 Disrupt this weekend, there was a talk by Alan Taylor, who is with Endeavor Catalyst, and Endeavor works with entrepreneurs across the world. Unfortunately, they're not in Pakistan. We hope they come here soon. But what he said was, we underestimate what we can do in a year. Yeah. And we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. So you have to have that vision to say, if you want to go from A to Z, how are you going to get there? But having said that, I think, again, scalability, you have to focus on a step-by-step approach. If you're looking at a business model where the market is not that big, you will never get to the point, you will never get to a certain level. That's going to be limiting to you. Okay. So it has to be relevant to your space and your business model. In some cases, things are difficult to scale because they involve a lot of human interaction, they involve a lot of resources, and so the approach there has to be a little different. If you're looking at a tech-based solution, then obviously it's the ability of your platform to be able to have more users and more, get out there and reach more people.
Right.
I
think what you said is absolutely true. And yes, from a tech platform, it's, what you have explained is just the right approach. I'll give you an example of a non-tech related business, and how from a small business there is potential of going global. So there is a company called Feedsol, and they produce silage. Okay, silage is animal feed. So small company started. Now they wanted to grow, so they looked for a distribution network. So they went to an institution called Engro. They said, we provide animal feed, you go and procure milk from dairy farmers, we should join hands. Okay. They said, okay. So suddenly from 45 farmers, they've got access to 4,500 farmers. Right. So that is scale. Okay. Then suddenly, Friesland Campania actually bought 51% stakes in Engro, and that's a Dutch company. They're in 107 markets.
And lots of.
So these kids went to Hague, and they said, why don't you invest in our business? Okay, and they said, okay, if you make it sustainable in 3 years, we'll take you to 106 markets. So suddenly, from a small rural Punjab-based business, they have an access to go global. Through distribution networks. So, unlike technology, in conventional businesses, you need to look for distribution networks that you can provide value proposition to, and then grow on that.
very good example.
Right. I also noticed your accent changed from when the group was talking to Angro here and when they went to The Hague.
होता है.
यहाँ थोड़ा सा देसी accent था.
Really? ऐसा आपको लगा?
हाँ, लगा, थोड़ा बहुत लगा. I want to do. I've just been told that we have one more question which we are going to take.
I said 2 or 3 more questions.
2 or 3 more questions in the chat.
I hope that means it's a good conversation.
I
Bajai
hope so,
iske ki we're not
yes.
addressing the questions that they want to ask.
You can convert NGO into social businesses.
We did
We
that.
talked
We
about
answered
that.
And there was another one right before that.
Oh, there's history's witness that despite having a strong primary social control, no efforts have been made in the field of social enterprises in upper level in Pakistan. Please please suggest solutions for government and people. So I'm wondering if this is talking about how every social enterprise is addressing the bottom of the pyramid. What about the rest of us? Perhaps that's what I'm deciphering.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they mean by upper level in Pakistan. Maybe they mean, yes, it could be. I think in a market like Pakistan, where the majority of the population is at the base of the pyramid, I think people are focusing on that because not only is there an opportunity, but there's also a big need.
Right.
Very often, businesses that are focused on you and me may not be social in nature from the social good perspective,
right.
But we have to realize social enterprise doesn't necessarily mean focused only on poor people. There are social enterprises, like for example the waste management example that I gave.
It impacts everyone.
That impacts all of us.
Right.
They are bringing efficiencies into the market. Like I said earlier, people, planet, profit. So there may be green businesses that are maybe in a market that is not necessarily focused on the poor. But they are focused on middle income and upper middle income,
right.
But they're running their business as a green business. They could also be a social enterprise.
Right.
So I just feel like the definition is a little broader than just those organizations that are working with poor people or providing access to goods or services which are not existent right now.
Let me address this question from the government level.
Okay.
So we're part of this consortium that is led by SDPI. And they are working diligently with British Council to develop a social enterprise legislation that needs to be presented in 2019, second quarter in the Senate.
Okay.
So what will happen now that inshallah in 2019, when you go to register your company, there will be a bracket of social enterprise as well.
Okay.
That's the aim. What would that do? That would basically open gates for the impact investment money that really want, because if there is regulatory framework existing in a particular economy, the impact investors are more kind of reassured about the fact that their deployed capital would be safeguarded.
Right.
And it's happening all over the world.
Okay.
So Pakistan is really in a good situation right now because there is already work that has started in developing a social enterprise regulatory framework.
All right. We're on our last few minutes. I just want to do a quick rapid fire session with you. I have about 5 or 6 statements that I have. You have like 0 seconds to think and 1 second to answer.
Where's the hamper?
Are we both answering at the same time?
Whoever answers first.
Oh, this is the...
That's all right. We'll let both of you.
Classroom scene, it'll be funnier.
Yeah, whoever raises your hand first.
Okay.
buzzer nahi hai.
Shall we make a sound?
No, just
Yeah.
it'll be really scary then. Okay, so the question is,
Or just shout out. Should we just shout out the
already
answer?
said it.
Just shout the answer.
Okay.
Or buzz.
press the buzzer. Okay.
Okay.
The buzzer is in front of you.
Yeah. Brrr.
Yeah, and the most innovative sound also wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a cup of coffee at the end. All right. What comes to mind first when I say this statement? A social enterprise that employs millions of people worldwide.
Not necessarily true. Oh, you want me to give an example of
The
it?
example.
Grameen.
Do you have an answer?
M-Pesa, I guess.
No, okay, fine.
It's not a social enterprise, technically, which is, yeah.
Is this true or false as far as you are concerned and as far as social enterprises are concerned? There's more to business than money.
Absolutely true.
Buzzer kahan tha? Faraz?
True. Absolutely.
Good effort, but not quite.
Hamper नहीं लग रहा कि मुझे
लग नहीं लग
मिलेगा,
रहा
नहीं.
मुझे भी नहीं लग रहा.
Tell me one company that comes to mind celebrating inclusiveness and diversity. A company that comes to mind that celebrates inclusiveness and diversity. A social enterprise.
A social enterprise.
A social enterprise that celebrates. Yeah.
So now PDP is an enterprise that's doing
that's not fair.
great work.
Yes,
great
absolutely.
work. थोड़ा सोच के बोला.
सही
दोनों
बोला.
को दोनों.
बिल्कुल
So
सही बोला.
they basically employ people who are differently abled, but it is a hybrid organization. So they actually use their skills. They make beautiful products with their hand. They're giving them access to. I know they had. I think they had a product where they were looking at rickshaws that were actually fixed so that people who were differently abled could also use them.
You can't.
ये मेरा जवाब है.
इस आंसर पे हैम्पर इसका हुआ है इतना अच्छा आंसर.
मुझे वाटर कूलर चाहिए.
वाटर चाहिए.
हाँ, वाटर कूलर.
वो नीलाम घर में मिलता था, अभी नहीं मिलता.
All right, for both of you, and you can only name a company you haven't named before in this session. Name a social enterprise you absolutely love. Can be local, can be international.
See Global. अब आप देखो टेक्निकली आपने कहा कि जो आपको बहुत ज़्यादा पसंद हो, मुझे पसंद है. नाम मैंने सी ग्लोबल का पहले नहीं लिया, मैंने बोल दिया. ओके
अच्छा सही है, चलें. सी ग्लोबल भी चलें.
नहीं. Let me.
I would like to name one that I've already named, so that's a difficult one.
Fine.
I think Mauka Online is very exciting.
All right.
They are the ones that are actually. Oh, PB.
मुझे भी इसका चाहिए.
पहले इनका देखिए.
अच्छा, we should give more examples.
Muhafiz.
Okay.
Muhafiz is a social enterprise that is integrating.
Also based out of Islamabad.
Yes, based out of Islamabad. They're integrating all the emergency and security services under one app. So, blood banks, CPLC, 1122, police, hospitals, everything would be accessible at the press of a button.
Right.
And these kids have been at it for the past 3 years, and the scale that they have achieved, the impact, they've saved more than 7,000 lives, real time.
Right, and I think his story is also really interesting because he felt the need because he was so frustrated trying to get in touch with emergency services.
After APS.
After APS, yeah, correct.
And
so, your buzzer please.
I already answered the Mauka Online.
Okay, there's nothing else you want to add? अच्छा buzzer की बस आवाज़ कर दें.
Buzzer की आवाज़ कर रहा हूँ. PB.
ये पीपी क्या होता है?
हमारे यहाँ बजर ऐसा होता है, आपको क्या मसला?
Okay, do you fund the entrepreneur or the idea? Yeah, for us.
Entrepreneur.
Okay. Serial entrepreneurs or?
Irrespective.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, 100% agree.
The entrepreneur?
Yeah.
All right. And I want to ask about your best experience working with one company. One either in the accelerator or either through seed ventures.
No, that's not fair.
Just one company.
That's just not fair.
Yeah,
Just one
it's
company.
like choosing a baby.
You
can't choose
सवाल
one.
है best gift hamper किसी को नहीं मिलेगा फिर.
पहले बताओ गिफ्ट हैम्पर में क्या है?
Gift hamper में क्या है?
Water cooler.
There are cookies in the gift hamper.
हाँ, कुकीज के लिए मैं कुछ भी कर सकता
हाँ, ठीक है.
हूँ. किसी का भी दिल तोड़ सकता हूँ.
Okay, what's your best experience working with a company? It doesn't have to be your own, but an entrepreneur that you have really enjoyed working with. You don't even have to name the person, just the traits and why you loved working with them.
There are many.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
very hard
honestly,
to
it is.
answer.
There are so many examples that.
This is your last question that we're wrapping up on. We can't have an open-ended
If I have to be
response.
biased and
Yes.
lose the hamper, I lose the hamper.
I agree. I think it's very hard to
Thank you,
to pick
Mustafa.
one or two.
Alright.
ये हमने आपको outvote कर लिया है इस वाले पे. Sorry.
The last question is there hope for social enterprises in Pakistan?
Hell yeah!
Okay.
For sure.
Great. So with that, we wrap up this session. We've been through about an hour and 10 minutes of discussion on various aspects of social enterprises, everything from raising capital to determining impact and influence, and also scalability. Both Misbah and Faraz have given you various examples of companies that you must look through. A lot of these companies you'll find on the newspaces.com website. I'd like to thank both Misbah and Faraz. So thank you.
Thank you.
Gift hamper will keep. And I'd also like to thank the bloggers and the university reps who are here in the studios. I'd also like to acknowledge our partner universities and the students who've been logging in to watch, and hope that the conversation continues within their classrooms, even beyond this. And again, as always, if you have queries and questions that you would like to send and submit for either panelist or panelists who we've had in the past, please do go ahead and go ahead. Our next session will be announced on our website, so do stay tuned to that. Be sure and like, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We are The New Spaces, and also on Instagram as TNS Digital. Thank you for joining us on this Campus Connections digital series. On behalf of Talia Zafar and the New Spaces team, this is Rabia Gharib signing out.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to say the next show for Gray's Economy.
That's a great one for
Exactly.
Pakistan.